Hello and welcome to the Movie Night Pajamas Sew-Along. I am Trissa and I am your host. In this video we will be sewing up the shoulder seams and sewing on our neckband. So for this we are going to be needing our front inner back piece as well as our neckband. So first we're going to start off by sewing our shoulder seams together. Remember we are using a 3/8 seam allowance unless stated otherwise. So we're going to be going ahead and sewing those two together, and then sewing our neckband in around with right sides together, again with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. When I sew my neckbands, I like to use my sewing machine instead of a serger, because when you flip the neckband and put them right sides together, it creates a lot of bulk if you use a serger. But if you use the sewing machine, it's a lot less bulk, and I feel like it looks a lot nicer. So I just use a regular straight stitch on my sewing machine, and so go ahead and do that. So for your shoulders and your neckband, and then we'll go ahead and attach the neckband after that. Okay, so you should now have both of your shoulder seams sewn on, and also your neckband sewn right sides together. So now we are going to attach the neckband in the round. So we're going to start off by pinning the neckband. See, this is what I was talking about. If you sew with a sewing machine, then you can have your seam flat, and then it'll be nice and not super bulky here. But if you had a serger, all of this fabric would be on one side plus all of the thread, and then you'd have a little lump right here. So that's why I like to do it on my sewing machine. So what I like to do first, just because it makes it easier for me, is I start off by pinning my neckband together all the way around, just to make sure it holds it in place. Okay, so now we're going to find the center front and the quarter points. So to do that, just fold your neckband at that seam, and then put a pin in the center front, and then match up that seam with that front pin for your quarter points, and mark that with a pin. Now we're going to be finding the center front and back as well as the quarter points. Keep in mind that on most necklines, the quarter points are not going to be the shoulder seams. As you can see here, that the scoops are different. So that's a big giveaway that our quarter points are not going to be the shoulder seams. If the scoop was the same in the front and the back, then it's more likely that the quarter points will also be the shoulder seams, but in this case, that's not. But we will use our shoulder seams to find the center front and center back. So go ahead and match those up. And then put a pin in that center front. And the same thing for the back. Then just like the neckband, we are going to match up the two pins together to find the quarter point. And repeat for the other side. Okay, so now we have both our neckband and our neckline pinned. So I like to pin my neckline starting in on the right side. So make sure you start, I like to start off with the back. That way I make sure that my seam on my neckband is on the back of the shirt. So go ahead and match up all those pins together. Okay, so now that we have all of our pins marked, we are going to stretch the neckband just enough so that it matches with the shirt. You don't want to stretch it too much that the shirt is also stretched. That's how you can get a wavy neckline, and you don't want that. So just make sure you're stretching the neckband just enough to match the shirt, and then go ahead and put a pin in that, and you're going to do that all the way around on the 4 sections between each pin. Okay, now with all that pinned, we are now going to sew it either with your serger or with a straight stitch. I personally like to sew my bands inside out, and so I will stick the fabric in the foot this way. That way it's easier when the foot is inside of the shirt rather than trying to do it this way. I mean, you still could do it on top like this, but I like the pretty loopers, the upper loopers, to be on this part of the neckband, and that way it looks nicer. That side just looks nicer on the serger. But you really could do it either way, but that's just how I do it, is I sew it inside like this. So go ahead and sew your neckband onto your neckline. Careful to keep your neckband slightly stretched as you are sewing along. Don't stretch your shirt. And then go ahead and do that, still with a 3/8 inch seam allowance. And then we'll come back and I will show you how I cover stitch to top stitch the neckband seam down. So now your neckband should be sewn on. I serged it, but I don't do anything with my serger tail other than cutting it off, because I start before the neckband seam, and then I overlap it about 1 inch, and then I just cut off my tail. However, you could tie it off, you can thread it back through, whatever you'd like. You can leave your neckband just like this if you'd like, or you can top stitch it with your sewing machine. I have had success with just a straight stitch. Using a slightly longer stitch. I haven't had any problems with pop thread. A couple of Max's pajamas are like that. You can also use a zigzag stitch, a twin needle. I am going to use my cover stitch to go ahead and top stitch the neckband seams down. I just feel like it helps keep the neckband to stand a little straighter, and it looks a little nicer. So I'm going to go ahead and show you that, and then. Okay, so I have a Brother cover stitch 2340 CV, or yeah, CV. And so when I cover stitch and top stitch my neckbands, this is a setting that I find has worked the best for me. A slightly longer than 3 stitch length, and then bumped up just slightly from the 1. But usually when I do regular hemming, for the most part, I usually keep it pretty much at 3 and 1, changing it slightly depending on the fabric. But that is the setting that I'm going to be using. So when I top stitch, I also like to have my shirt inside out. Makes it a little bit easier in my opinion. And I always like to start before that seam line. It's kind of hard to tell. It's kind of see. So here I'll start before that seam, and then I will go over it again when I at the end. But so in this, the seam right here, I like to try to line that up. If you see here, it's kind of hard to see, right where you see the three holes for my needles. My needles are in on the middle and the right. I try to keep that seam line really close to that right needle, that hole, just so I don't like my thread to go off of that seam line. I think it makes it look a little, it doesn't look quite as good. I think it looks better if you keep all of your stitches on that stitch. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So you can kind of see here in the light, if I can turn off the light if that helps, you can kind of tell that my line is right, that my seam line is right there with that. Kind of washes out with my light on just because I'm having white fabric. It's almost impossible to see when it's black. But let me find my petal. Thick spots like shoulder seams, that kind of help it along, just so it doesn't get stuck. Lift up your pressure foot. So your thread should have pulled through. If you ever have one of these, it should pull through to the back. Okay, so whenever I'm tying off anything, I like to do a square knot. If you do a square knot, your knot should not come undone. So what I like to do is start off with the single in one hand and the double in the other. So I take the single over the double and bring it through. Now the single should be on the other side. Now take the single back over the double. And that should have created a square knot. If you're a little nervous, do the same thing again. The single over the double and take it through underneath. And then again the single over the double and take it back through. And there you have it. And then go ahead and trim all these threads. See, now you can see how much nicer that lays flat now with it top stitched. So there you have it. That is it for today. If you have any questions, go ahead and post that on the Sew Little Seam Facebook page, Facebook group under today's thread. But I can't wait to see your neckbands.